Hey guys, Matt Bernier here. In this video, I'm going to show you my Tave to teamwork.com API integration where I've automated when a job is booked in Tave, all that information flows into a custom teamwork.com project, automatically sets the dates and deliverables with timelines, and allows you to auto-assign tasks and whatever else you need to do to communicate this within your organization. So let's get started. Here I have my Tave account, and I'm just going to give you an example of what's happening, and then we'll work backwards to see how it's happening. So I'm going to open up this booking here. Let me just save it. And first, to show you, I'm going to go into my project list. This is called Matthew's Bar Mitzvah, and I'm just going to refresh this just so you can see it doesn't currently exist as a project. So now, if I book this job, I'm going to do it as a customer here. You can see I've got, we'll add text message sharing. We'll add an extra hour of time. So here's my event. I'm going to continue. Payment schedule, that works. The questionnaire that I ask to collect all the data based on where the job is, what time it starts, information about the venue, etc. So I've just pre-filled this out just to make it quicker here for this video. I'm going to send that in. And then, of course, we have our contract in order to book this event. And there we go. So the event is booked. If I go to Tave, it's going to reflect booked status here. And now my automations should have created a job in my project teamwork.com account. And there it is right here. Let's have a look. So I've got my job created. As you can see, it gave me the due date of July 2nd, which is one day. Actually right here, July 2nd. So that's the date of the event. And then my task list, I have due dates going to July 3rd, which is just the day after the event for some post-event related tasks. So here are all of my tasks that are created based on this event. Now we can also go into our notebooks page here. You can see we have 3 notebooks that were created. We have our Tave job contacts, which will just provide all of the information pulled from Tave with those job contacts on the job. This is also great because it's fully searchable across teamwork.com. So if I were, for instance, trying to remember what job I was thinking of and Richard Cheese came to mind because they're a planner that we work with, I could just search Richard Cheese and all of the related projects, tasks, milestones, however you want to search by will be presented here below and let you click and reference right to that job. Also, if we go back to notebooks, we have our Tave order details. So this is going to be exactly what was booked on that order quote invoice, but the pricing's been stripped out. So as you can see, we have our full glam experience with our text message sharing and extra hours, but there's no pricing. So this is great if you have your teamwork.com account and you want to bring in the team members working the event or anyone else that you just don't want to have access to sensitive pricing data, but still want them to get the entire details of what was booked. And finally, we have our Tave questionnaire response. And you can see here, this is a full HTML formatted response of the exact questionnaire they filled out in Tave. So word for word, you can have all of your custom fields be assigned in here. So you don't have to worry about pulling the custom fields in one at a time. You could just have it come in as the questionnaire. And you'll notice here, it does say V2. So I actually had already created this questionnaire and I pushed it through on a previous job. So whenever someone submits a questionnaire initially, it says the response is submitted. And then when they go back and change something, it says it's been updated. So I've actually got this built out so that it'll push all of the updates and overwrite the original response here. But teamwork.com gives you these versions. So you can always go back and see what changed in their response. Really great to keep track of client changes that you may not necessarily identify what changed due to what they've updated on that questionnaire. So that's basically the gist of everything that's happening here. You can, of course, do a lot more in your teamwork.com account with automations, messages between your teams, and further assigning out tasks. So now that you have a gist of what's happening here, let's dive into how this all works and how you can create this yourself. So the first step is in Tave, we actually need to update our questionnaire to include this job.ulid token. So I've just added this as a custom paragraph field at the bottom, and if you try to search this token, it won't be referenced in the little token manual. So just type it in exactly as you see it here. And this is basically your API key for this job so that we can reference it later in our make.com integration. Now, the next thing is this webhook. So in Tave, we need to push this data to see when a job is actually booked so that we can trigger our automation to pull the data that it needs, and at that point in time, create the job in teamwork.com. So this is just a simple webhook to my make.com address here. And you can see I'm pushing a few fields. So I have my job ID, my job name, and my Tave job API ID. Now I have this automation set up in Tave to push this webhook when a job is booked. That's the first step. That's just going to allow us to trigger it at the exact moment that it's booked. And then if we continue on here into the make.com account, you'll see I've got a decent sized automation set up. And so I'm going to walk you through each step of this and kind of give you a medium level overview of what each of these things do. So the first thing is going to be our webhook. That was the address that I just showed you in Tave, where we're pushing that data, and this is just waiting to receive that data. The next step here is going to be our set variable step. So for this tool step, you're actually going to be passing your teamwork.com API so that we can properly authenticate it and run these API commands later. So to do that, we're going to type in basic, followed by a space, followed by base 64, and the open parenthesis here. To get this API key, we're going to go into our teamwork.com account, click your profile at the bottom left, and then click Edit My Details. You'll see here under API and mobile, once you click into that, your token can be presented here. Obviously, you want to keep this private because if someone has your token, they have access to your account. So show your token or create one if you don't have one, and then copy it and paste it into the make integration. Once that's added, we can move on to the next step. And you can see all of these little globe bubbles. I've labeled Teamwork or Tave. These are our API calls. So on Teamwork, we need to get all of our projects. And this is so that we can compare what's existing and what needs to be created and make sure we don't have duplicate projects. So we're getting the projects using our get command here. This is our authorization token from an earlier step that we're referencing, so we don't have to type it in over and over again. Now we have a filter, and this filter is basically mapping to the jobs that it sees against the job coming in from Tave via that webhook, and we are referencing the job name here and making sure it doesn't exist. If it does exist, it's going to stop. If it doesn't, it's going to continue. This step here is going to set the variable for the project list names so that we can filter them further. With this step here, we're getting our job worksheet from Tave. So you can see here, I've referenced the Tave API ID, which is being passed through from that webhook. This is our full URL. I do have my credentials for my API key saved here under this Tave API app. So in order to add that app, all we're doing is clicking add. And we're going to pass this API key as x-api-key. And we're going to enter our Tave API key here. To find your Tave API key, you're just going to go into your settings, go into API integrations here, and then your key will be displayed once you click new API key. If you click edit, I believe you can view this key again, but they have said that it's supposed to be hidden, which doesn't make sense to me. So make sure once you create your key, you copy it and just save it to a note doc on your computer somewhere safe that you can reference later. So we'll have our key in there and hit create app. And then for future steps, you'll just choose your Tave API from this dropdown. I already have mine set up, so I just need my URL, my get command, and that's going to pull all of the jobs from Tave. This step here is going to get the Tave order details, which is basically going to reference the quote on the job so that we can later scrape that and pull in that quote information. So here's the URL for that, and it's a get command. This next step here is an iterator step. And what this does is it's going to iterate the data items, which I've assigned. You can see here, this is step 61. I've assigned the data line items for step 61 by clicking into data and then clicking into items and finding my line items here. So when I click on this, you can see it does the same exact setup as before. This is going to basically break down the array of data, which means multiple line items from my invoice so that I can properly use them. This next step here is just going to be how I format that data. So I'm choosing my previous step as the source. And the way I have this broken down is just the name. So that's the name of the actual invoice item times the quantity, the units, because I want to know how many of these were booked. And then the description in HTML format, just so I can get a nice pretty view of exactly what that invoice looks like. Now you can see I have the price per unit, so I've obviously not included that on here. I don't want the price, but you can include whatever you want from that job. Now the next step after that is JSON formatted output. So this is just a transform to JSON step where I've selected the previous text because we need to pass this information in a way that the app can actually read. After that, we have our set variable step. So I'm setting multiple variables here. The first is project start date 90 to before. So I use a 90-day planning timeline essentially for all of my projects. So of course, if it's within the next 2 weeks, that 90-day timeline is going to have condensed due dates. But in general, if they book us 90 days in advance or 3 years in advance, we only really need 90 days to plan for this job. So what I've done is added these date format steps and then basically added this -89 number. And the reason it's -89 as opposed to 90 is due to having job tasks that are actually created after the job is due 1 day after. So within teamwork.com, my job has a 90-day timeline +1. So I need to subtract 1 from this to get me the actual date of when the last task would be due, plus the extra day for post-day tasks. Kind of confusing, but when we get through this, hopefully it makes more sense. Now, I also have my Tave API ID here that I'm passing through from step 21, which is just that webhook step. And then finally, we have our lead notes, which I'm passing through as well, just to get any lead notes that were associated with that job. And I've just stripped the HTML and I've selected this from our Tave get job worksheet step. And this one is actually not being used, so I can delete that. Now we have a filter for checking if the job is closed. So if we've come this far and, let's say it's processed a job because it's in the completed stage, for whatever reason, let's say you manually moved it from a stage to booked and it was already completed. This is just going to show us, hey, this job is not closed. It's not going to continue. It's not in the fulfillment stage, at which point we don't really need to do anything with because it's already done or about to be. Now we're going to check our teamwork.com project ID. So this is going to allow us to see what the projects are on my account, basically. You can see my authorization here from the prior step. And we're also going to check our account ID, which you can see is a get command. There's the URL, authorization also from the prior step. And now this is a somewhat hidden API call to teamwork.com that I was able to get from their developers, but this is going to let us clone a project. So before you can clone a project, clone a project template. Before you can clone a project template, you need to create a template in your teamwork.com account. So I'm just going to pause briefly, jump into my Teamwork account just to show you where that is. So under templates, projects, this is my project template that I created based on my 90-day deliverable timeline. You can just create one going into templates, hit the plus button, choose start from scratch, and build it out how you want. Now into our make.com integration again here, we have our request for this project clone. And this is a big request content here. So what we're doing is basically looking to create a new project from a template. We're using that date that we referenced before for the start date. We're using this project template ID, which in order to get this ID, if we're in our teamwork.com account, usually when you're in a project, you can actually get it from the URL here. Let me just verify that that's correct. And yes, that is correct. So the ID is the same URL ID here, very easy to find. The installation ID, however, is your teamwork.com account. So that is why I have this prior step, just so you can run this module. And I would need my authorization here. But once I run this step, basically it'll give me that ID here for the installation ID. So with the installation ID and the source installation ID in place, we're copying this project. Here's the title of the project, the description of the project, and all of the remaining fields in order to copy this project appropriately, along with all of its tasks and due dates. Now for my custom field step here, a little bit more complex, I'm passing through the Tave API ID so that I can reference it in the future and be able to do a search, and also for future steps, be able to link those two projects together. And a bit more information here for generalized stuff, but this whole thing, I'm going to copy this and put it in the description just so you can easily reference it. Basically, you want to create everything as is and just change the tag IDs, installation IDs, and anything else that has a hard-coded number here, like these custom field IDs, to match what's inside of your account. Now, the next step after that is going to be our parse JSON, and this is just going to basically format a previous step so that we can add that data into our teamwork.com account. In this case here, we're going to work with the notebook first, and this notebook step is going to let us push our job contacts, and then in a different step, our questionnaire. In this step, also our invoice quote from Tave. So we're going to pass this get command to get all of our notebook categories. And I'm sorting this by category name of Tave, because in our teamwork.com account, for my notebooks, the category name I'm using is Tave, just so I know everything that comes from Tave is going to be sorted into a Tave notebook. So this step is going to get notebooks with the name of Tave to get the category ID associated with them. This next step here is a post step. There's the URL, my authorization, and this is going to allow us to post a Tave orders details notebook to that newly created project using our content, which is that JSON string that's going to be the body, and our category ID, which is just going to reference that Tave category ID so that it formats it nicely and sorts everything in that account. Now, if we continue, we have a step here to iterate on the job contacts, which just means if there's more than one job contact, it's going to get all of them. A text aggregator step, which is going to reference that previous iterator step. It's going to group it by the name of the contact. So that way all the contacts are sorted by name, and then all of their details that you require, as you can see here, this is what I have, are below that. So we have their name, email, cell, home, role, and a link back to their account. After that, we have our text aggregator step, which is basically just done here so that I can format this text nicely and it's not a jumbled paragraph. And then we have our JSON formatted step. So again, we need to format any HTML data that we're sending to JSON properly so that it will actually work. Otherwise, it will just break. Now, if we continue, here is our teamwork add notebook with job contacts step. And you can see here the way that that's broken down with our content category ID to match Tave. So these steps are just a duplicate essentially, but copying different data. So this one's our orders details and this one is our job contacts. Now, with all this set up, if we leave this on, every time a job is created, this is just going to happen automatically. There's nothing you need to do. So the next make.com integration that we have is for the questionnaire. So right now, Tave does not have a way to pass questionnaire data through via the API. And if we're passing custom field data through, it's very, very complicated and convoluted in terms of referencing that data. And also you're stuck with stuff that you can't get if the questionnaire is not assigned to a custom field. So the way to get around this is to actually set up a mail webhook in your make.com account that's basically just going to watch an inbox that's set up on make.com for emails. Now, when Tave, someone completes a questionnaire, you get an email saying someone has responded to the questionnaire. And then likewise, when they update the response, you get another email saying someone's updated the response to the questionnaire. This full email is broken out to give you the exact questionnaire responses they gave you in that HTML formatting. And so what we're going to do is use this step to watch this inbox. I have a forward set up in my Gmail. So anytime that Tave email comes through with a questionnaire in the subject line, it will forward it to this custom mailbox here. And then it'll process from there so that I can scrape that questionnaire into my API, teamwork.com account via the API. So for this step here, we have this custom mail hook set up. And again, we have a forwarding automatically done based on a Gmail filter. And we have a router which points us in one of two directions. So if this is a new questionnaire and it does not contain the subject line of updated, which is what happens when there's a change to the questionnaire response, it's going to flow up here. And if it is an updated questionnaire, it's going to flow down here. Now the steps are virtually the same. The only difference is down here at the bottom, it's going to update the questionnaire, the notebook on the job, as opposed to add a new one. So that's the only difference top to bottom. So this next step in the process is going to parse the Tave job API ID. So what that means is at that questionnaire step I showed you, if we look back in Tave here, at the very bottom, we have this event identifier, job ULID. So I've just added this to the bottom of all my questionnaires. And what this will do is this will reference the Tave unique API job ID for this job. And what that means is later on, I can search that email. So I can search the body of the email that's sent. You can see here, this is our HTML content and text email for that API ID. And that'll tell me this is the job that that questionnaire is associated with. So that's the de facto way to filter it, as opposed to using a job name or an email, which could have the same email on multiple contacts or multiple jobs. So this step here, I'm parsing a regex pattern, and this is going to be kind of complicated, and this will vary depending on what you have. But if you create in Tave this exact paragraph at the bottom, event identifier, internal use the same spacing, then you can use this exact pattern search in your make.com account. Make sure everything else is filled out here as you see on the screen. And for the text step, we're just selecting the text from the mail hook. So it's going to filter it, it's going to find the job ID, and it's going to continue. Now, before I forget, just like the prior make.com integration here, we have this tools step, which is allowing us to assign our same API authorization ID with this proper formatting for our teamwork.com account so that we can reference it in later steps. So make sure you add your teamwork.com API auth ID here in the same format you see. Now onto the teamwork.com step. You'll see I have that reference to the API auth. This is a get step. I'm looking here for all of my projects and I'm including this custom fields true so that I can see the custom fields assigned to them. Because in my teamwork.com account from the previous integration we just explored, when I create a project, I'm also adding the Tave API auth ID into that project as a custom field. That's going to allow me to reference it here or in any other step so that I have a de facto link of the project here versus the project there. So it's getting all those projects, and then I'm processing those projects using an iterator step. And you can see here I've referenced the data projects. Now the projects have custom fields, and then they also have an ID, and I need to get the ID of the project with a matching custom field. So after this step, I have a filter step in between, which is going to map my custom field, and it's going to pull the value, and it's going to see if the value contains this identifier, which is just my job ID. If it does, it's going to process this array aggregator step using step 17, my iterator. And I'm going to select my custom fields from this aggregated fields box, as well as my ID. Those are the only two things we need. And then we can hit OK. And down here, we can add a JSON step. We're going to process the HTML content from the email again so that we can format it and send it over in our API call. And then we have two final steps here. So the first is going to get this teamwork.com notebook category ID from the job. Again, you saw this in the previous integration so that we could figure out what this category ID is for the category called Tave inside of our notebook categories. And then finally, we're creating that notebook. So this is a post step here. You can see I'm referencing the proper job ID from a prior step, and then the authorization. And here is my command that I'm giving it. So it's processing all of the content here for the HTML email, and it's adding that category ID, which will link it to the Tave category ID that I've created. And here you can see at the bottom any of my other steps. This stuff is pretty standard, but this is the stuff you want to change. And we can click OK. Now for this bottom route, we can just right click, select the whole branch, make a copy of it, and then paste it down here and connect that branch. So that'll allow us to reduce the duplicate steps we have to create manually. And then towards the end here, the only difference is after we do this notebook category ID call, we're going to do a get notebook call. So this is going to get all the notebooks on this project in mind. And then we're going to set the notebook name that we're looking for, which will be called Tave questionnaire response if you followed the previous steps for setting that up in this make integration. And then finally, we're going to update that notebook with this URL using a put request here. And we're going to update it and we're going to overwrite a few things. So we're going to change the description to updated response from Tave. You don't have to do that, but just what I chose to do. We're overwriting the content with the content from this step, which is just that update. And the category ID is going to remain the same as Tave. And you can see here, if, again, it's a new notebook, it's going to create it new. If it's existing, it's just going to update it. And in our teamwork.com account, we'll see when that update happens, the version get added to it. So every time it gets updated, we'll add a new version automatically. Just a nice way to reference that data and know what's been changed. So that is how you integrate your teamwork.com account with your Tave account and process your job data automatically to flow into one account to the other and automate your project planning. I know this was a pretty big video, a pretty big deep dive, and there's probably a lot, especially if you've never used make.com, that you want to explore and you have no idea what I meant by any of these steps. That's okay, because I've made it super easy for you to implement all of this in just a few clicks. I have two blueprints, one for the original job data from Tave into your teamwork.com account automation that we explored at the start of this video, and then another one for the automated questionnaire importing, which is done using a webhook in your mail account to forward those questionnaire emails into make.com. With both of these blueprints, basically all you're going to do is upload them into your account, change a few step details to match your API keys, and then save it and you're done. That's all you need to do. So stay tuned for a couple more videos that I'm going to put out on implementing those blueprints, just so you can have an overview of how that works. It really only takes a couple of minutes. Now, if there's anything else that you're looking for in terms of integrating data from your Tave.com account to your teamwork.com account or otherwise, just let me know in the comments. I'm interested in hearing what you would find helpful and can explore building out more scenarios in future videos. Thanks so much for watching.